fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Well, welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. I've got Mr. Michael Hawley here.
That's correct.
How you surviving? Yeah, so you watch the Golden Globes?
No, I'm from Buffalo, so I was watching the Bills.
Oh.
So and then tonight we've got the Houston Texans, and I think our author that we're going to be interviewing is probably a fan of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Great.
but the other nice thing is we have in common is I'm a retired Navy pilot. So.
Oh, very cool.
So and then your Air Force background with test pilot's pretty cool.
Oh, thanks.
Wow. You guys might as well do the interview. I just do my nails.
Just take a nap, Al.
Take a nap. That's it, right? Well, joining us, the third man in the room, he's got a newer book out, or the third book in a series he's got. It's called Embers, and it's part of the Spark Chronicles novel series, and it's the book 3, of course. And Pat Daly, so thanks for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, anytime. So what's been going on in your life? We talked to you when you did book 1, and this is book 3 of this series, so you're working on that, but how's everything else going?
Everything else has been going pretty good. A lot of moving, some interesting stuff at work. I do some aviation consulting, so that's been some cool stuff there with hydrogen power and battery powered airplanes and all that. All my technical background kind of feeds into the book, so it's been interesting. Been a fun couple of years.
Yeah, because you classify yourself. I see. Well, publisher of the books are classified a lot of times under hard science. So you take science pretty serious, right? It's not just all made up.
I do. I try to stick to science as we know it, with one or two obvious exceptions, and even those in general, I try to keep them along a plausible line.
Well, except for, I did notice, it said that you had worked for NASA, Johnson Space Center, and it says Space Shuttle, International Space Shuttle programs. So when I see that, I say, well, we all know the moon landing didn't happen, and the world is flat. So how do you...
Oh, man.
How do you deal with all that? Because that's been a huge thing lately. And we're not talking just, grandpa down the road that says it. We're talking, they got thousands online in these groups, and they really believe all this stuff.
It's a little bit horrifying. And that's, I think we're pretty close to a zero trust internet. And so that makes me worry about those among us who will believe virtually anything. And it's kind of scary. On the whole flat earth thing, I just saw the movie with Emma Stone and Jesse Plemons, Begonia, and it has a very subtly played flat earth theme that you don't really get to until the end.
Yeah, and it kind of worries me in the sense that as human race, we've come a long way. We've been able to do a lot of things, some of them good, some of them bad, and I think that the achievements are real. And why so many are jumping onto it like it's fake and it's not real and it's been some sort of conspiracy, and there's different reasons for that. But it worries me in the sense that, does that mean we're going to stall as a human race? Like, we're not going to do anything scientific, or we're going to hold back on that because it's all fake. That's what worries me about it.
Yeah, and I think that's worth worrying about, because if we don't believe the advances we've made, then there's very little appetite for paying for more research, more development.
Luckily, SpaceX and Elon Musk is not going to get. That's not going to get in his way. he's going straight for it. And the other thing I liked was recently the India space moon probes, Chandra, took photographs of the Apollo 11 on the moon.
Yeah, the landing
so
site.
Apparently, how is India part of the conspiracy? I thought it was the U.S. government that was part of this conspiracy, but India is now part of that? We must be.
They'll get them in there somehow. And Japan just landed too, didn't they, on the moon? 2 days ago,
I think so.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So when you're writing your books, like this series, the Spark series, none of that affects you. You still stick with the science and things that you know, and it doesn't matter to you if there's people out there kind of go, oh, this guy's part of the conspiracy or whatever.
Yeah, I don't worry too much about being thrown into the conspiracy realm. Sometimes I'll have a little fun with some of the conspiracies in the book or in the books. I'll be good-natured about it.
Well, that's all you can do, really. I mean, at this point. So let's talk about this, the Chronicles, the Spark Chronicles. So what is that? What's the overall story or idea behind this?
Okay, the overall story is a young Korean-American kid is orphaned under pretty horrific circumstances. He ends up in the foster care system, and because of his previous living situation, he's developed some childhood trauma. And his mom was a hoarder. They lived in a absolute filth, rats in the house, and so as a defense mechanism, he starts sleeping with a knife because he thinks that's the only way he's going to be able to defend himself and his mother from what he calls the thing in the wall. So when she dies, he ends up in the foster care system because people aren't too crazy about having a teenage boy living in their house who sleeps with big ass knives. He bounces around a little bit and he's in a new home, wakes up in the middle of the night, needs to go to the bathroom. So he gets up, still holding the knife, walks down to the bathroom. And about that time, his new foster mom emerges from her bedroom and sees him in the hall in his underwear with this giant knife and is convinced that he's going to murder them all in their sleep. So she screams, he runs. There's a bit of the tale of him getting to Spark, but Spark is an acronym for Solar Prime Augmented Reality Park. And it's a Disney scale adventure park where a lot of the things are based in augmented reality. So you can mix the real and the virtual, and along the way, he meets a young woman who goes by the name of Feral Daughter, and there's a whole other story behind that. And they start out butting heads and end up holding hands. And as they go, they start peeling back the onion that is Spark. And they realize that there are things that the average park goer just doesn't know. And they get deeper and deeper into it. And at about the same time, bad folks are coming trying to steal the technology behind the park. They get involved in that and end up having to fight for their lives, being targeted by some assassination attempts. Will actually ends up going to jail for a little bit, or actually they don't call it jail for juveniles, do they? Juvenile detention. That's where he ends up. And gets out of there. They continue to fight for what they believe in and to protect the park, which has become their home. It continues on, and unfortunately for them, the situation escalates and escalates, and now global powers are getting involved in the struggle, and it gets really ugly and tense towards the end.
Feral Daughter, that's actually Mike's nickname.
And?
Just so you know, I just thought that was kind of, well, what a...
More things in common with Pat. I know it.
Yeah, I see. Well, how does this work for you when you're putting together this kind of it's book 3, and so there's a lot of writing involved, but you're kind of going into the details of the science and Spark, and you've got this world that you've created and all that, but at the same time you've got to detail characters, like for instance, your main character there who's in foster care and he's got all these issues, and you've got the knife, and you've got to get through the detail of the people, your characters. How do you work those two together? Like, do you kind of create this world and then bring in characters and develop their, let's say, needs and issues?
Yeah. I start with a really fairly vague concept of the world. And then I focus first on the characters and what they're going to be like, what their drives and needs are going to be like. Because I think when I do that, then as I flesh out the world they're in, then I get more authentic behavior, reaction, and dialogue from them. And of course, there's a bunch of other characters that come in along the way. And by that time, the world is fairly well formed, and it's a little easier for minor characters to create their various personalities.
The protagonist, it sounds like almost young adults. Is it? Would you categorize it like that, or?
Yeah, publishers call it young adult, but I prefer young at heart, because when I look at my reader demographics, I have as many readers in their 60s as I do in their teens. I think it appeals to a broad range of ages.
When you're creating these characters, they're creating their drives and needs and stuff. Do you take that from your own life experience or people you know, or is it you just got a super imagination and it just happens one night when you're dreaming? Like where do they come from?
A lot of them come from my life. The character Will is actually based on a young man that my wife and I were trying to help for a while, and his background was he lived in foster care. His parents had died horribly by the time he was 13, and his mom was in fact a hoarder, so he was living with rats. He was in fact sleeping with knives, and so that gave me kind of a basis for this character. Now, from that point on, everything I added was complete imagination on my part. And then the female lead really started out as an amalgamation of my own two daughters. And so I could think about them and think about how they react. And then I've got some other friends in life that may not know it, but they're the basis for some of the characters in the book as well.
So when you have an important character like someone like this Will, who's based off of someone that is in real life and someone you're trying to help and you kind of know, and they're important to you, and just like your two daughters and stuff, it's very real for you in that. How do you come out of it? Like after spending, let's say, a year writing the book and putting them through all these things, in a way, you're putting characters that you know or care about in a certain way through things. And at the end of it, at the end of the book, are you kind of relieved, or does it change you in some aspects?
It does. And I like that question, because you start, I mean, if everything is sunshine, rainbows, and unicorns, it ends up being a fairly dull story. And if you don't have the ups and downs, if you don't put your characters through some trials and tribulations, then you end up with a story that's not that interesting. So I feel bad for them for a while, and my daughters in particular have gone back and forth with, no, she's more like the other one than me. And so they argue about that a little bit. But at the end of the day, I know where the characters are going to end up, so I don't feel so bad, although putting them through it can be a little bit traumatic.
Yeah, you're mean.
It sounds like you have your daughters as beta readers, or do you have others to help you see how you've done and read it for help? Yep.
I've got a couple of writing groups that I'm in, and we swap pages and talk about stories and plots and all that. And then, I've got a group of beta readers that my daughters are part of. And my daughters, my wife, a couple of friends, and actually some original readers of Spark have signed up to be beta readers for the follow-on books, because they loved the universe so much. So it's been nice to get a variety of perspectives on the work.
So I wonder, so your dialogue then with your characters, how do you create that? Like how do you work on dialogue?
I know where I want the conversation to go, And so I started off with a prompt, and then I try to not force the characters to get to the end, but nudge them along the way. And I want them to respond as authentically as I think they would in the real situation. So sometimes they get upset about the conversation. Sometimes they get upset at the situation. And so then I have to deal with that in real time as I'm writing it and figure out how they would resolve it and how they would move on. So yeah, sometimes that's a little troublesome. And again, here's where beta readers come in very helpfully. This doesn't really sound like her or doesn't really sound like him from what we know of them so far. So please, consider rewording this. Fine.
Did you use Mike as a beta reader, considering he was feral daughter?
See, I tell you, he knew me.
He could have helped you out with dialogue.
Yeah.
Well, so are you the writer that the real life affects how you write and the type of mood you're writing in, or are you in a totally different world? You just sit down and you kind of go in a different place, and it doesn't matter what's going on in your life or outside world. It's just you're in there, and it doesn't.
Oh, real life impacts me tremendously. And sometimes I will do things to try to moderate my mood, because if I'm grumpy, that's fine if I'm writing a grumpy scene. But if it's not a grumpy scene, then I got to do something to get myself out of that mood and into a mood that's more appropriate for the scene. Or sometimes if I know that there's a scene upcoming where they're going to be grumpy, I'll jump ahead, write that a little bit, get it out of my system, and then come back. But there's two things I try to do to moderate my mood as I'm writing so that it's consistent with the book. And one is, music. I love to put on, I've got a little writing playlist, and I'll put that on and listen to that and let that, help me a little bit. And the other is if I'm just feeling a little too grumpy or otherwise out of sorts because of what's going on in the real world, and I don't want that to bleed into the book, then I'll just go take a walk, get a little sunshine on my face, get out of the house, maybe haul the dog around the block or something just to lighten my own mood.
You have, because you're an engineer background, you like new airplane designs. Do you ever think about that kind of stuff just to get your mind away? Like, for example, airplanes with solid-state batteries or something like that. That'd be cool.
Yeah. And sometimes, I do have a fair amount of consulting still. So in the last 2 years, I've worked on a hydrogen-powered aircraft and a battery-powered aircraft. For you, Mike, one of the things that changes when you're battery-powered is that your gross weight at takeoff is the same as your gross weight at landing.
Oh, yeah.
You're not burning up a lot of Jet A and putting it into the atmosphere. You're hauling it all with you. So you got to be really careful about your weight because, if you're at max gross weight for takeoff, you're going to be at max gross weight for landing. Unless you jettison a passenger or two.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea.
It's really interesting. Did you have a kind of something you wanted to get across to readers as you're writing the book, or did it lead to that or happen to that naturally, maybe, some sort of a meaning or a subtext?
Yeah, I don't think I knew what it was when I started writing, but I'm a generally hopeful guy, and I've done a whole lot of work and research into AI, and I think we're kind of terrified of AI right now. And I'm not saying that's wrong, because I think there's a lot of things to be afraid of when it comes to AI.
I've watched Terminator. Yet, I know it.
Yeah, no kidding. Going to go all Skynet on us. I read a couple of books in the last year. One was called The Coming Wave by a guy who started a couple of AI platforms and then sold them to big tech companies, Google and whatnot. And then, and his name was Mustafa Suleiman. He wrote a book called The Coming Wave. then I found out that Henry Kissinger had written a book about AI. And you could have knocked me over with a feather because I thought he was long dead and buried. But he and some other guys wrote a series of articles that eventually became a book called The Age of AI, and it was published in 2023, which also happened to be the year that Kissinger did, in fact, die, or so they say.
Yeah, he's not dead. Come on.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think AI in itself is kind of it's packaged in that way of intelligence, and it's not really, and I think it's more about what people do with these things that we develop as a human race. You know what I mean? Like inventors and science comes out, and it's kind of the evil that people do more so than the product itself. And isn't that kind of more the terror? Isn't it kind of more about a statement of what humans do to these things that can be so good and so helpful and progress in a way, and we kind of do bad things with it.
Yeah, I'm with you there, because whoever invented the first firearm, they probably thought of it as, a hunting tool, some way to help bring down the buffalo and feed their family, and then of course it becomes a tool of war as well, and then a tool of crime. And so it's not always the invention as much as the intention that gets warped, I think.
Yeah. Because you can look at that with the internet and the way social media and everything's developed. In one way, it can be so good. You can get so much information off the internet. You can connect with people you don't know or relatives far away. There's so many positive angles to it, but it's always the bad stuff that kind of comes along with it that we kind of have to put up with, which is that's the hard part. It's kind of what humans do.
Yeah.
Enough about that. So where do you go next? You said you've got beta readers for the rest of the book. So how far are you going with this?
Well, it actually ended up being a 4-book series, and Embers was the last book because I had a little discussion with my editor, and Embers was getting too large. And she said, "You're not J.K. Rowling. You need to pare this book down a little bit." And she said, "I think you can cut this or cut that." But both things that she wanted me to cut were things that I'd gotten great feedback from readers on before. Seeing Will and Farrell engaged in one of the quests. And so I decided to pull that chunk out of Embers, and then it was sitting there on my hard drive, and I said, "You know what? I'm going to turn this into a novella." So I spent some time working on that, pumped it up, published it as a novella. So it actually sits between books 2 and 3. There's 4-ish books in the series now.
Well, that's when you tell the editor, "Yes, I am J.K. Rowling." You just didn't know. Surprise.
Yeah.
Well, listen. You like to interact with readers and fans and people and all that stuff. How do you like to do that? Do you have a website set up? Do you have social media set up? AI somewhere? How do people get a hold of Pat?
Okay. I've got my website, which is thepatdaily.com, and that's also where I blog. And then I've got an X account, but honestly, I don't look at it much. I don't do much with it. But I'm on Instagram. I'm Pat Daily Pics, and on Facebook, I'm Pat Daily Author. So they can find me both of those places. Still, my favorite though is actual mail, physical mail, and honestly, I'm not really sure how they found me, but I do get fan mail sometimes, and it's not creepy. It's kind of fun to get an actual letter still.
I forget how to do that.
Yeah.
Wow. I have to look that up. I think, didn't we used to get stamps and you stick them on and.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's kind of past.
Phone booths, everything. There's so many
things
go on.
Geez, that went away. Well, listen, we appreciate you being here. And, of course, we'll have the books. We'll have your website, everything up on ours so people can find you. And we appreciate it. Spark Chronicles. And there's book 3 out, Embers, but there's also a 4th, like you said, novella. So there's lots to catch up on. And we appreciate you being here. Pat Daly, thank you.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Al. Take care.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.